You're listening to 50 Pirates in 50 Days on the Sports Objective Podcast. A new era of East Carolina football is here and will begin on August 31st when Mike Houston leads the Pirates into action at NC State. Between now and then, join us for a daily trip down memory lane as we experience Pirate football through the words of the men who made those memorable moments happen. Here's your host, Bubba Rosenbaum.
Welcome into the Sports Objective Podcast as we continue on with our 50 Pirates in 50 Days series. And over the last couple of shows, so we've talked to some punters and place kickers. Well, today we're going to catch up with a former deep snapper for the Pirates, Brandon Howard. Brandon, welcome into the show.
Oh, great. Thanks, Bo. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on to talk about your memories of playing football at East Carolina. And I know you're originally from Jacksonville, Florida. So take us back then, late 90s, year 2000, your recruitment, and maybe what other sports did you play besides football, if anything, and just tell us about those things.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I played at the Bowl School, which is a private school in Jacksonville. Played for our head coach, Corky Rogers, who has since retired, but is still one of the winningest coaches in the state of Florida. So that was obviously a big deal. For me, there was a lot of great learning that happened during those times. But I got a phone call from Tim Rose, actually, who was our defensive coordinator at the time. He was kind of recruiting that area, and they said they were looking for a deep snapper to come in, and I kind of went through the recruiting process. Remember, actually, and it's funny because I actually came on my official visit during the bowl prep at before the Gallery Furniture Bowl in 2000, where they were actually playing Texas Tech and the former head coach here, Cliff Kingsbury. So that was actually a pretty interesting little tidbit in terms of that. So it's funny that I am where I am now. But it was one of those things where I was an undersized offensive lineman, but I had kind of been deep snapping since I was a kid and had kind of developed an affinity for it, and was lucky enough to get some coaches calling me and wanted me to play for them in college. And Coach Rose kind of stayed with me. Coach Logan, at the time, I spoke with him, and he was kind of one of the things where he was in part of my recruitment. Came on my official visit, and loved the area, loved Greenville, so it was a pretty easy decision for me to be a Pirate, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Kind of like you said, you were coming into ECU when East Carolina was coming off, I guess, a 9-3 and then also an 8-4 season in 99 and 2000 respectively. So you were coming in when the getting was good, and then in 2001, your freshman year, you snapped right away, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the first game we played against West Virginia. I remember on my official visit when I actually committed. Coach Logan at the time said, "Hey, are you going to be ready to snap against West Virginia?" And I said, "Just put the ball in my hands." "Yes, sir." That was kind of, me being a kind of an arrogant kid at the time. I knew I was good at what I did, but yeah, I was like, absolutely, So I was excited, and the first time running out in Dowdy Ficklin was something I'll never forget.
So that's what you're talking about, Coach Logan's comments about snapping in front of a sizable crowd. I know during the course of your career, you started all 4 years as deep snapper, 2001 through 2004. So you had 2 years for Coach Logan and then 2 years for Coach John Thompson. You played on the road at the likes of Syracuse, West Virginia twice, at number 2 Miami in 2003. So talk about that experience snapping in front of large crowds in those types of venues.
Yeah, I mean, that's always kind of the surreal part when you finally get to those places, right? You grow up watching college football, obviously being a fan, and, obviously being from the state of Florida. Going to the Orange Bowl and being able to play against the University of Miami, I think was an amazing experience. One, I had a lot of family that was able to come down from Jacksonville. Two, I mean, at the time, they were the hot team in college football. They just come off winning a national title. I mean, you look back on that game and the amount of NFL players that were on the field, for them. I mean, we weren't too shabby either. There were some guys that we had that, that played in the NFL and had great careers. So I think that was probably one of the cooler venues that I played in West Virginia. Obviously, we go there this year with our guys, but playing there twice and, being in kind of that atmosphere was pretty impressive. Those are things that I have a young son now that I'll be able to tell him about, talk to him about, but be able to play in front of 50, 60,000 people, it's, there's no other feeling like it. I mean, it's an exhilaration that, only few people, a select few of ever really going to be able to understand and be able to see. And so that was probably one of the more fun parts about being able to play for the Pirates.
With what you did, obviously, deep snapper is a little bit different deal as opposed to playing another position. So when you're a specialist like that, this is something, it's a question I asked Andrew Bays, who wrapped his career up in '99. And then also I mentioned this to Davis Plowman, who kicked for the Pirates from 2013 to 2016. Just talk about a typical practice and some of the things that you would do to hone your craft.
Well, the way that our practice was set up, we kind of did special teams was kind of at the very beginning of practice. So we would come out early, we would get some work in, make sure we were ready to go, obviously stretch and do those things. And when we got through with through that portion of practice, then there were times where we had kind of a script of things that we needed to accomplish, whether it was so many snaps a day, working on some accuracy drills, working on blocking techniques as my career progressed when we changed schemes and different things. So there's always some little intricacies and things that you can work on throughout practice. Finding drills. A lot of times early in my career, we had to kind of develop our own drills and our own means of filling in time between what we did at the beginning of practice and maybe if we had some situational things, some 2-minute drills or some last second field goals or some different things like that we might have to do during practice. And there were other times, me, because of the type of guy I was, I would always try to do extra lifts, and that was kind of where my affinity for strength and conditioning kind of came in. Was I was always a kid that loved the weight room, maybe more so than others, but it was one of those things where I would ask our strength coaches at the time, can I get an extra lift in? Is there times that I could go in and do these things? So that's kind of how we would fill our time, depending on where we were in the season, what our schedule dictated and allowed.
One of the things that you would often hear Coach Logan say, and then you would hear from other coaches as well through the years, and it certainly makes a lot of sense. So oftentimes players want that notoriety, but as a deep snapper, if your name's not getting called and people don't know who you are and you're anonymous, then that's a good thing because that means you've been snapping the ball well.
Correct. It's one of those positions, and I kind of understanding that having grown up as an offensive lineman, you have your job, right? And your job is to get it done. And if you get some notoriety for maybe making a tackle or something, that's great. But the whole point is get out there, operate correctly and efficiently, get off the field, and let the game transition how it's supposed to be. You don't want to be the cause or the reason for a turnover, for a loss of field position, change of field position. Like, that stuff cannot happen. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where get in and do your job. And, the less notoriety you get, the better. And that means you had a great career.
So we've talked about some of the top venues you played in and some of those sorts of things, but top memories or maybe just a favorite moment or two, what are some of those that really stand out about your time playing for East Carolina?
Well, the biggest one I will always say was the first game, the first time I ever got to run out through the smoke and to Purple Haze and run through the band and come into Dowdy Ficklin. That'll be something I'll always remember. I want to say probably one of the highlights or the most recent, highlights of my career was, being able to kind of be in a group of guys that kind of started and not really had a great career in terms of like where we finished in terms of winning games and everything, but we had a really great collective group of seniors that I was able to be a part of. And, we went through a couple of years that weren't very good, and there's a lot of guys in that room and a lot of guys on that team that I really respect and, really had a great time with in terms of playing. So I think the greatest memories that I've always kept is the relationships that I've built over time with those guys. But if I'm really going to pick a game that I would say was one of those games where it was probably something I won't forget is when we upset TCU, 2002, we upset TCU at home when they were nationally ranked. I think that was a year where we weren't playing as well, but we were able to beat those guys at home. It was a kind of a thing where we had a lot of young guys that were playing, and beating a nationally ranked team at home that year I thought was probably one of the cooler things that I was able to be a part of.
Yeah, I recall that game. Like you said, not the biggest of crowds because of the way the season was going, but I remember Travis Heath, I believe it was, stripping the ball and taking it down the sideline for what was
recovery.
Game deciding score. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But in other words, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you referenced some of the trying times during your career. So you were coming in when things were pretty good, a lot of expectations in 2001. You went 6-6 that year. I think something like 5 out of those 6 losses were by a touchdown or less, though. It was pretty crazy how close that season was to being great. And then things started to decline a bit. And then you also had the benefit, and not during your playing career, you went on to be a strength and conditioning intern under Mike Golden, who was the strength coach under Coach Skip Holtz. So then you were part of the ascent back to championship status.
Yeah, Coach Golden gave me my first opportunity as an intern. I was doing it as a part of my degree. But like I said, I had always kind of been a guy who was always loved the weight room, always loved the training aspect. So it was one of those things where I was excited to be able to learn. And I learned a lot, guy that used to love to train and really thought I knew what strength and conditioning at the college level was about. I learned a lot that I still carry to this day. And I spoke to Coach Golden probably, that's been 6 or 8 months ago when I was at Ole Miss. He actually came up and was coming through the area. So I was able to thank him for that introduction to what you really have to do and what you really need to do and to be successful in the field, and how you have to be open-minded and listen. It's not always about because you were a player. There's a lot of other aspects that go into this profession as opposed to just being a guy who likes to lift weights. So that was one of the things that I've conveyed to him, but I'll never forget. So it was one of those things where I was proud to be a part of the program, and hopefully one of these days, hopefully get back to be in a position where I can come back and help the school that gave me so much. So it was definitely a learning experience, but something I'll never forget. And I'm just glad to have been, a small part of that ascent back to where the program should have been.
Right, and that's one of those things you really have to take a tremendous amount of pride in, kind of having bookends on your career in terms of bowl games. Your final year at ECU before you moved on to other things that we'll talk about in a moment, you got back at the PapaJohns.com Bowl.
Yeah, well, actually, with that, I was only there for the
spring semester. I got you.
Yeah, so I wasn't actually there for the fall. I had graduated, and kind of finished, but being able to at least be there during the off season and kind of see how that was running, saw the work that those guys put in, that guys that I had played with and guys that were coming in, and being able to see those guys succeed and come out and have a successful year and get back to a bowl game where we feel like as a program we belonged every year. That was really glad to, like I said, to have been a small cog in that machine that was starting to kind of build up some momentum at the time.
So before we move on to what came next, let's talk a little bit about. I want to kind of pick your brain. How did you decide to go into strength and conditioning? I know you got a bachelor's degree in exercise physiology in 2005, and then before going on to get your master's in health and human movement from Utah State in 2009, you did that internship with Coach Golden. Were you still trying to fill out the business, so to speak, and determine if that's what you wanted to do, or did you know right away that you were wanting to go into strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I had always really, like I said, had an affinity for the weight room and kind of training. And that my initial, thought process going into school was to go to physical therapy school. But I went and wanted to work in the strength and conditioning field to kind of just want to see if it was something that I wanted to pursue as a career. So after doing that, after my internship, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I felt that it was a connection that was able to be made with student athletes and kids, and watching them progress and change and grow. That was more important to me than what they were as maybe a quote unquote patient or file as a physical therapist, at least in my perspective. So after I finished, I went home and worked at a private facility while I was trying to find a graduate assistantship to work with athletic departments and things. It took about a year or so as I was kind of working through that. And then that's when I was able to, I got offered a position to go to Utah State and be a graduate assistant strength coach. And that's kind of where the whole career kind of started and kind of gone on from there.
So arriving there to Utah State, I know you're head strength and conditioning coach. Dave Schultz. Talk a little bit about him. I know he's that relationship you built with him at Utah State back then, and then you, as we'll talk about, you had another stint just a couple years ago at Utah State. That led to where you are now in Lubbock, Texas, at Texas Tech.
So yeah, kind of like a brief deal. Dave and I were both graduate assistants there at the same time. He started ahead of me in terms of the program. We worked for a guy by the name of Mark Uyama. Mark is currently the head strength and conditioning coach for the Minnesota Vikings. So he was the first strength coach that we worked with there at the time. So did a couple of years there. Dave actually got promoted to being an assistant while I was finishing my graduate assistantship. So like I said, we spent a good 2 years together just building a relationship as not only colleagues but friends, and kind of both developing as coaches and kind of working our way kind of through the weeds as we went. Like I said, after spending a couple of years there, I took my first full-time position at Georgia Southern University. So get kind of back close to home after being in Utah, which is you never thought it was a place you'd end up, let alone twice. But took a assistant job at Georgia Southern and was able to do some really good things there, kind of at the FCS level. Worked under Chris Hatcher at the time, who's the head coach at Sanford, and Jeff Monken, who's now the head coach at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So got to see it go from an air raid to a triple option offense was pretty cool. But the biggest thing that I found there was I was able to work for a guy by the name of Tom Melton, and Tom was our director of strength and conditioning there, and kind of was the first guy that I was able to work for and continue to mentor myself and kind of prepare me as I'm going through this field and being able to work with not only football but a variety of different teams. So that was definitely a really, really great experience for myself.
So that you talked about the success, and obviously that Georgia Southern program is a very proud one. Going back to the days of Irk Russell and all the tradition there, the SoCon days and those battles with App State, who we're so familiar with here in North Carolina. So after that, I know you were the head strength coach, if I'm not mistaken, at Southeastern Louisiana, and And during your, I believe it was 5 years there at Southeastern?
4.5, 5 years.
Yeah,
yes,
4.5 to 5 years at Southeastern. And during those years, the football program and the baseball program both won a couple of conference titles in the Southland, and then also postseason berths.
Yeah, that was, luckily I had a great opportunity to work for a guy by the name of Ron Roberts. Ron was the head football coach at Delta State down there in Mississippi, and had some connection with him through the offensive coordinator that he had at the time, and was able to take that job. And I think, that was a huge opportunity for me in my career to be able to run my own program and not only be a head football strength and conditioning coach, but run an entire strength and conditioning program that consists of 14 athletic teams. So, we had some really great success, had some great players come through there. We were able to, win a couple Southland Conference championships, not only in football, but in baseball. So, it was a really amazing learning experience, and one that kind of shaped and helped mold me and taught me so many things that, there's only one way you can really learn that. And it's kind of, as a young coach at the time, it's kind of sticking your feet in the fire and saying, all right, here we go. And if I'm going to make some mistakes, I'm going to make some mistakes, obviously. But, we were lucky enough to be very successful. And then after a period of time, it was time for me to kind of make that next move. I had just gotten married, so it was an opportunity came up to go back to Utah State as a full-time assistant, working with a good friend of mine, with Dave Schultz at the time. So, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, it's time to get this move and make this move to the FBS level, and continue to kind of build not only my knowledge base and my experience level. And so I went out there for a couple of years and worked for Dave and Coach Matt Wells, and we were able to, went to a bowl game in 2017. Had some really great players come through there, and really enjoyed being back in a place that I had gone to school and a place that I had enjoyed my time. It was really good. My wife and I were, like I said, we had just gotten married. We're first time really living together and doing those things, and so that was great. And then we were lucky enough to had a son that was born out there in 2017. So, with a lot of great things happened during my time in Logan. And like I said, it's a very special place.
Yeah, so I've actually never been to Utah, but just seems like an absolutely beautiful place, as you say. And I know my parents, and they had the opportunity to go out there when the Pirates played BYU in 2015, Coach Ruff's final season. It was 2015, and they went out there and had an extended stay and didn't just go to the ball game. They were out there for the better part of a week, and they just had an unbelievable time.
Yeah, so I spent 2 great years there, and got a phone call in January of 2018 to go work for the University of Mississippi. Really good friend of mine, really good colleague for some years. Paul Jackson was the head strength coach there. I've known through one of my mentors, Gail Hatch. I don't know if anybody knows who Gail Hatch is. Gail was one of the big kind of starters of the strength conditioning field. He trained guys of the likes of Tommy Moffitt, Scott Cochran, Vic Deloria, some different guys that have kind of been really big-time guys throughout the profession. He's also the head Olympic weightlifting coach for the United States in the Athens Olympics. So that's kind of where I had a connection with Coach Jackson, and at Ole Miss he had called me, and an opportunity to go work in the SEC and kind of be in what they consider the best conference in college football was kind of a no-brainer. Like I said, I was only there for a year. Got to work with him and do some great things there, and then an opportunity came back to be the associate director here at Texas Tech when Coach Wells and his staff came here, and those guys are like family, and it was kind of an opportunity that I couldn't turn down professionally, and for my family. So we came out here in January of 19, and kind of that's where we are right now. We're just getting ready to actually report here in about an hour with our guys starting to roll into the building.
In addition to football, what else, if anything, will you be working with Texas Tech?
We're going to be. I will be the football only here. It's the only sport I will be working with. So I do a lot of my time is concentrated on with our big guys, our O-line and D-line, and our front 7 linebackers, tight ends. That's kind of where my emphasis stands. And then obviously dealing with anything from a transitional rehab standpoint to some individualized training to nutrition, and it's kind of an all-encompassing holistic method where we all kind of work together and, trying to get things done the way that we feel they should be. And we've had some good success so far. Now we're just ready to get the boys to line up and go play ball here in about a month.
Obviously, Brandon, you're extremely busy and just tending to things there with the Red Raiders and the season that's on the horizon. But talk a little bit about the Pirates and as far as keeping up with East Carolina, and then your thoughts on the new head coach, Mike Houston.
Well, it's funny. I've actually I met Mike Houston. He and I actually interviewed for him when he took the job at James Madison. So some things had worked out better in the situation. There's a chance I could have actually been a part of the Pirate Nation again. But amazing coach. Just seeing the things that he's done at Lenore Ryan, at the Citadel, at James Madison. I'm very excited about the hire. I thought it was the perfect hire for the program. And I think he's going to do things and bring the program back to the national level of prominence that it deserves. So I think the Pirate Nation should be excited, as I've seen. I try to catch as many games as I can. Obviously, my schedule dictates how many games I get to see a year. Have not been able to come back and see a game in quite some time because it hasn't really worked out. So whenever they're on TV or I can catch it, I'm still there rocking my purple and gold. Even though I'm a Red Raider right now, I'm a Pirate at heart, and that'll never change.
And that's one of those things with the increased exposure. And when we had a decent amount of exposure when you were part of the program, but it's even grown since then. All of our games are on some sort of ESPN platform or the CBS Sports Network. So that's the thing. You have the opportunity to DVR games or go online to ESPN3 and watch them at your leisure if you have any downtime.
Yeah, I try to make sure I keep up with it and watch as much as possible whenever I can. So it's one of those things that obviously now with the internet and the way that the social media platforms and all these different things that are now kind of commonplace nowadays, it's very easy to keep up with the Pirates. And like I said, I'm going to continue to do that till I can no more. But it's so, Eastern North Carolina and the university are always going to be a huge part of who I am and what I am and where I am now. And it'll always be something that I'll never forget, and I'm always going to be extremely, extremely thankful for the opportunities that not only the university gave me, but the football program gave me.
And Brandon, one of the final question I have for you is this: you hear head football coaches, even on the high school level now, say this all the time, but it's even more prevalent, of course, on the college where you have different dynamics as far as the players being there on campus or and that sort of thing. But in terms of the strength coach, after the head coach being the most important person on staff, because all the time you and your staff spend with the athletes. And so talk a little bit about that, and then the role that strength and conditioning plays not only in the physical development but the mental development.
Yeah, I think people forget about the amount of time that we are actually with these student athletes. You know, you kind of put on a variety of different hats. You know, as a strength coach, obviously you're a coach, you're a disciplinarian, you're a sociologist, you're a psychologist. Sometimes you're just an ear for some of these kids to talk to. I mean, the things that some of these kids go through, you know, they sometimes they need somebody to talk to, right? So being able to, you know, I tell people, yes, we are in the physical development business, right? But I say we're in the people development business also. You know, we're here. We have these kids during the prime time of their life that we're trying to develop great men and women, you know, depending on what sports you work with. So we want to develop great people, great leaders. And some of the things that we teach them and we instill in them, whether it's time management, being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, nutrition, how you eat, how you sleep, you know, those things they can carry on to their kids later on, you know, so we can pass on some things that these guys can take when they become, you know, functional members of society. Like, that's the biggest thing. We want to also teach them that the sport that they're playing, yes, it's a great outlet, right? It's a great way to get to education. If you're lucky enough to play at the professional level, that's great. But we want you to be able to be something else other than that when your time is done. Even if you are lucky enough to play in the NFL or Major League Baseball or whatever it might be, we want you to be able to be a functioning member of society and be able to take all the little things that you've learned from being a collegiate student athlete and take that into your life. And when you see kids come back later on, they talk to you and they call you and they text you and they still interact with you over the years, that is the biggest thing that we as strength coaches really do. And it's that lifting weights and running and sprinting, that's all part of it. But I think how you affect people, how you affect change in their life, how you affect them as a person, I think is the biggest thing that we can do, you know, on top of the physical development aspect.
Absolutely. That's a large part of that answer is why I got into teaching and coaching myself. Even though that's what I'm on the middle school and high school level down through the years. But those students or student athletes that come back and show their appreciation for the role you had in their life, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
But Brandon, we certainly being so generous with your time. We know you have a lot going on with the guys reporting today, and so it's been great catching up. We look forward to catching up with you down the road, and we'll continue to follow your career. And as always, go Pirates.
All right, Bo, appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on. Good luck to the Pirates this year. Be watching out here from West Texas.
Absolutely. Best of luck to the Red Raiders as well.
All right, thank you, man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, Bo.
That concludes this edition of 50 Pirates in 50 Days on the Sports Objective. Remember, join us daily between now and game day as we'll talk Pirate football with players from various eras. All these interviews are available exclusively on SoundCloud and our YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe and follow so you're alerted when we post new content. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, go Pirates!